When people hear Titanic, they think of a movie, a love story, a soundtrack. I hear a history lesson, because in 1912, a ship called Titanic sank in the North Atlantic, and in 2023, more than 100 years later, in almost the exact same place, a submersible called Titan was crushed on its way down to visit that same wreck. Two different machines, two different centuries, the same disease. Not a technical problem, a human one. The arrogance of power. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1912, when the Titanic was built, it was more than just a ship. It was a statement. Even the name was a statement. Titanic comes from the Titans of ancient Greek mythology, giant gods, symbols of overwhelming power that ruled before the Olympian gods. Calling a ship Titanic was like saying, this is not just a boat, this is a giant, this is a god of the sea. Some people even argued the name itself was almost blasphemous because it was taken from a false god said to rule the world. And the marketing fit the name perfectly. They built it around three promises. First, luxury. Not 5 stars, think 7. The first-class passengers on Titanic were the global elite. A single first-class ticket cost about what a crew member might earn in an entire lifetime working on that ship. Imagine working 30 or 40 years and still not earning the price of one cabin. The food, the music, the service, they even had their own orchestra on board. Everything said, this is not travel, this is prestige. Second, size. Titanic wasn't just big, it was the biggest passenger ship the world had ever seen. About the height of an 11-story building, roughly like putting 4 city blocks of buildings side by side and pushing them across the ocean. Third, and this is where the real problem began, unsinkable. Unsinkable. Unbreakable. Nothing can bring her down. They treated that slogan not as advertising, but as truth. And once you believe your creation cannot fail, you start making decisions that only make sense if failure is impossible. Take the lifeboats. Titanic could carry about 3,547 people at full capacity. On its first voyage, it had 2,223 passengers and crew on board. And yet, the lifeboats on that ship could carry only about 1,187 people, just about 1/3 of the ship's maximum capacity. Why so few? Because in their minds, the ship was unsinkable. Why clutter the beautiful decks with more lifeboats? Why block the view for first-class passengers? Why waste space on safety equipment you will never need? So they installed enough boats for around 1,100 people, assuming they'd be used for short transfers between ships, not for a full evacuation. Safety had become a cosmetic detail. That is what arrogance does. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just quietly crosses out the boring safety lines on the budget. Now let's talk about the voyage itself. Titanic set sail on April 10, 1912. 4 days later, on the night of April 14th, it entered a region of the Atlantic known for icebergs. Other ships in the same waters sent warnings. There are ice fields ahead. Slow down. Be careful. The captain, Edward Smith, was no amateur. He was 62 years old, highly experienced, and this was supposed to be his final voyage before retirement, his grand farewell. And yet, somehow, this last trip became the place where all that accumulated confidence hardened into something more dangerous, overconfidence. Multiple warnings reached the ship, but he didn't treat them like life-and-death alerts. At one point, he went to sleep. The radio operator, tired of passing on warnings that nobody seemed to act on, eventually stopped forwarding them. If your mind is already convinced, my ship cannot fail, then every warning looks like noise. He didn't even reduce speed. Think about that. You are heading into a region full of ice, at night, in the North Atlantic. You do not know how big the icebergs are above the surface. You certainly don't know how huge they might be below the surface. And still, you maintain speed. Because in your heart, you're not really negotiating with reality anymore. You're negotiating with your own pride. Around midnight, Titanic struck an iceberg. Not gently, at full speed. Within about 2 hours and 40 minutes, this giant, this unsinkable masterpiece, broke in two and disappeared beneath the ocean. Out of 2,223 people on board, around 1,517 died. About 68% of the people on that ship. They gave priority to women and children and to first-class passengers. Many men stayed behind and drowned. Many third-class passengers never even had a real chance. The ocean does not care about your marketing. It does not care about your social class. It does not care what you called your ship. It simply answers the question, did you respect the laws that Allah placed in this world, or did you play games with them? Now fast forward. More than 100 years pass. In 2023, a group of adventurers decide to visit the wreck of that same ship, lying at around 3,800 meters below the surface of the Atlantic. They build a submersible. They call it Titan. Again, the same route, the giant, the unstoppable one. And again, the same mindset. We know almost nothing about the deep ocean. Scientists say maybe we understand 5% of it, maybe less. At about 1,000 meters down, around 4,000 feet, the pressure is already brutal, roughly 1.5 tons of force on every square inch of the submersible surface, enough to crush almost anything humans are used to building on land. To reach the Titanic, you need to go much deeper. This is not a playground. It's one of the harshest environments on Earth. And yet the company behind this submersible treated the risk as almost trivial. A billionaire from Pakistan took his son on board. The head of the company himself joined the trip. If they had truly believed there was a serious chance of catastrophic failure, they would not have been so casual with their own lives. There was even a financial expert from Las Vegas who was invited on an earlier voyage. The CEO called him personally and tried to convince him to go. The ticket price? Around $250,000. The man had the money, that wasn't the issue. But he said, I'm not comfortable with the safety of this submersible at that depth. And what was the response? Something like, crossing the street is more dangerous than going down to see the Titanic with us. He even mocked him on the phone. Later, when everything went wrong, that quote ended up in the Daily Mail and other media. It's painful to read. On top of that, they reportedly used off-the-shelf consumer electronics for parts of the control system, buying components from normal electronics stores for a vehicle meant to operate under absurd pressure at the bottom of the ocean. Again, if you truly believed you were dancing on the edge of physical limits, you would not cut corners like that. But when Titan lives in your head, the world feels smaller than you, until the ocean reminds you how big it actually is. And this pattern is not unique to ships and submersibles. Look at the Challenger shuttle in 1986. The very name, Challenger, the one that challenges. Engineers raised safety concerns. Warnings were there. But pressure, politics, and overconfidence pushed the launch forward anyway. The shuttle exploded shortly after takeoff. Look at Napoleon marching into Russia. Look at Hitler opening too many fronts at once in World War II. Look at any empire that thought no one can stop us. The details differ. The sin is the same. Arrogance of power. Modern technology, ancient disease. And long before any of these events, the Quran described this psychology. There was a people called Ad. They grew powerful, wealthy, advanced for their time. At some point, they said words that could be translated as, "Who is stronger than us in power?" That's not just pride, that's spiritual blindness. Allah responds by reminding them the one who created you is stronger than you. The winds, the storms, the forces you cannot see, all of these belong to Him. And when He sent a fierce wind against them, their power meant nothing. Then there is Qarun, Korah, a man drowning in wealth. People around him admired his riches, and he said something like, "I was only given this because of knowledge I have." Not, "This is a test from my Lord," not, "This is a blessing and a responsibility," just, "My knowledge, my skill, my genius." And Allah reminds us, Didn't he know how many powerful and wealthy people were destroyed before him, people stronger than him, with more resources than him? The pattern is old. The Titanic is just a modern chapter of a very ancient story. The Quran also gives us a powerful image. When the earth takes on its decoration, plants full and beautiful, people are convinced, we have mastered this land, we control it now. Then, suddenly, the command of Allah comes, at night or during the day, and it becomes like harvested crop, like it was never full of life only yesterday. This is reality. You build a ship as high as 11 stories. You name it after ancient gods. You advertise it as unsinkable. You reduce lifeboats because safety is unnecessary. You ignore ice warnings. You keep your speed. And within 2 hours and 40 minutes, it's in pieces at the bottom of the ocean. You build a submersible to dive to 3,800 meters. You name it Titan. You talk as if crossing the street is riskier than descending into crushing pressure. You mock people who question your safety. You buy parts off the shelf. And then one day, in a fraction of a second, the pressure of the ocean answers, and there is nothing left to argue about. So what are the lessons from Titanic? Not just icebergs are dangerous. Everyone knows that. The deeper lesson is, whenever humans start to believe nothing can touch us, they begin to edit reality in their favor. They delete safety margins. They ignore warnings. They gamble with other people's lives. They forget their true size. Faith, real faith, doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. Honest about the fact that seas, winds, ice, and pressure are not toys. They are creations of Allah. Soldiers, if you like, in a universe we do not control. When you remember that, you don't become passive, you become careful. You still build ships, but you don't call them gods. You still explore the ocean, but you respect its danger. You still pursue ambition, but you don't cross out all the boring, unglamorous safety checks because you're in a hurry to impress the world. Humility is not shrinking your talent, it's putting your talent in its proper place. Knowing that whatever you design, whatever you code, whatever you finance, whatever you lead, it all exists inside a universe that does not belong to you. And when you know that, you naturally do two things. You take sensible precautions in this life, lifeboats, warnings, backups, second opinions. And you take sensible precautions for the next life, obedience, gratitude, repentance, and refusing to make a god out of your own ego. Alhamdulillah for the gift of seeing ourselves at our real size. Because when you see that clearly, you don't need a disaster at sea to teach you humility. You can look at the Titanic, at Titan, at Challenger, at the stories of Ad and Qarun, and say, I don't want to learn this the hard way. If this sharpened how you think, this channel is for you. Peace be with you.